Okay, so real talk, my entire For You page has been nothing but Krampus Festival videos lately, and honestly, I've become obsessed. The outfits, the fire, the music, the vibes are simply immaculate. But the more videos I watched, the more I started thinking, what is this? And why exactly are we celebrating a demon goat during Christmas? Like, I've heard of Krampus, obviously, but I never actually knew what he was. So I did a little bit of digging, and by little, I mean I fell into a rabbit hole so deep that it literally loops around the earth. And let me tell you, this lore is older, weirder, and way creepier than you might think. So buckle up and let me take you back, way back, because this story starts with pagan winter raves and somehow ends up with Coca-Cola Santa. Hi, and welcome to Creeps and Crochet, where we unravel eerie tales one stitch at a time. Today we'll be discussing the weird and wacky origins of Christmas while crocheting a Krampus plushie. If you'd like to follow along and make it with me, the pattern and the materials I'm using are listed in the description below. Otherwise, pull up your crafts, get cozy under a blanket, light a candle, and let's begin. Christmas has always been such a comforting time of year. The lights, the presents, stuffing yourself with way too much food, and finally getting a breather after the chaos of a very long year. And when you think about it, traditions make sense. For most of history, winter wasn't cute or cozy, it was dangerous. Food was scarce, nights were long, and people needed warmth and community, a reason to keep going. So, across the world, humans created festivals. Huge fires, feasts, rituals, celebrations, and honestly, if I lived in a snowy mountain village 2000 years ago, I'd want something to celebrate too. And from what I can tell, that's kind of how Krampus became a thing as well. Krampus shows up in some of the earliest pre-Christian pagan traditions of the Central and Eastern Alps, places like Switzerland, southern Germany, and Western Austria. He's usually described as a half goat, half demon creature with cloven hooves, curling horns, wild eyes, fangs, and a very questionably long tongue. Okay, just a quick craft check-in just so that you guys know what I'm doing. I've just started on the tail and I'm going to crochet up to join his little body later on. Basically, Krampus embodies how terrifying winter used to be. The darkness, the cold, and the literal fight for survival. Later, these traditions were paired with St. Nicholas, and together they created Krampus, which I absolutely cannot pronounce, so I'll put it on the screen here somewhere, but they held it on December 5th. And St. Nick rewarded the good kids, while Krampus, well, he beat the naughty ones with burnt branches, rattled chains, stuffed them in sacks, or literally dragged them to hell. Just, normal Christmas activities. This festival was usually paired with plenty of alcohol, people in animal skins, and carved wooden masks. They often had bells tied to their costumes so that people could hear them clank through the darkness, and they usually carried sticks and chains. But all of this just makes so much sense because being in the middle of winter in the Alps, people have needed something to look forward to. But they also needed a way to make sure their children behaved. I imagine not listening to your parents 2000 years ago in the middle of the winter in the Alps could pretty quickly lead to death, right? But here's where things get weird because Krampus is just one character and a much bigger and much older winter tradition. Okay, so next up, I'm just going to work on his arms so that we can join it to the body later on. Okay, first up, we have another one from the Germans, and this one was called Yule. It was actually held a couple of weeks after Krampus in late December, and they celebrated it for 12 days. 12 whole days. And, well, let's just say the Germans have always kind of known how to rave, right? Anyway, the festival marked the lowest point in the sun's yearly descent and celebrated its inevitable rise. Basically a big, thank God winter is half over already party. Which, I mean, is kind of already sounding a bit like Christmas, right? The whole 12 days celebrating, but let's hold that thought. Because it was actually connected to the Norse god Odin. Yes, the same Odin who welcomes warriors into Valhalla. Now, his lore goes hard, but that's definitely a whole other video. But anyway, in some traditions, Odin was actually seen as the old man winter and actually went house to house, joining everyone's celebrations. And apparently, he even gave gifts to children who left shoes filled with hay for his horse, which, can I say, might actually be the cutest tradition that I've ever heard associated to a god of war and death. But anyway, shoes, treats, we're starting to see where we're heading, right? One of the biggest parts of Yule was the burning of the Yule log. Families kept it burning for all 12 nights while they feasted, and they decorated their homes with evergreen wreaths, holly, and mistletoe. The children also brought gifts of fruit decorated in branches to their neighbours. These gifts were meant for the tree spirits, basically like asking them to please come back in spring. Now we've got tree spirits and gifts. We're definitely getting warmer. Okay, now we have 2 arms. I'm just gonna work on the legs before we can start the body. Okay, now let's step away from the Germans for a second and let's talk about the Italians, who are hosting another festival that I absolutely cannot pronounce. I'll put it on the screen here somewhere. But it basically means birthday of the unconquerable sun. This one was established in 274 AD by Emperor Aurelian and was held every year on December 25th. Yes, December 25th. That day should look very familiar to you. And like Krampus and Yule, the festival celebrated the winter solstice and the return's sun. So at this point, basically everyone is celebrating around December 25th, except for the Christians. Not yet. But we'll get into them. And this is a plot twist that not everybody loves to talk about. But the Romans held this after a week-long festival called Saturnalia, where the slaves were given temporary freedom to do and say whatever they liked. Moral restrictions were relaxed, and the whole Roman Empire basically turned into a giant party. They held feasts, gave gifts, and had 30 chariot races throughout Rome. It was basically like a Roman Empire themed Mardi Gras, which honestly sounds incredible. Sign me up. But this next part is where things get weirdly familiar. Leading up to, people exchanged candles, wax fruit, and wax statues. A statue of Saturn, normally bound, was even unbound, presumably to come out and join the fun. Homes were decorated with greenery and lights, and presents were given to children and the poor. It's sounding a little Christmassy, but just wait because it gets even better. Because then we have the Celts and their winter solstice festival, which was held by the Druids, which I feel like most people have at least heard of the winter solstice, or at least vaguely heard of it, right? But then we have the Persian festival which celebrated the longest night with food and family. And then the Indian festivals of, again, I'm so sorry, I'm not going to pronounce these names because I'll butcher them. But these celebrated winter and the sun's northward journey. All these different cultures, but all the festivals have the same general vibes, right? And now we're getting closer to why Christmas might not be as original as people think. And honestly, we could spend this entire video just talking about these ancient traditions because there's so many of them and they're all so interesting. But anyway, you get the general vibe, right? We have feasts, log burning, gift giving, decorating trees, massive party. It's all very Christmassy. But once I researched all these, my next question was, how did all of these ancient traditions become one central party that was known and celebrated across the globe? Well, enter the Christians. And this is the part where everyone on the internet kind of fights about, so buckle up. Okay, I just crocheted around and up the body so that this round we will attach his little arms. So, unless you've been living under a rock, you probably know that when Christianity spread, it spread big, like empire level building big, and pretty fast. But we're not going to go into all the details because that would honestly require an entire mini series, multiple historians, and probably a whiteboard behind me. And to be honest, there's way more qualified people to deep dive into this era than me. But here's a simple version. The Christians entered the scene within the first few centuries AD and slowly expanded across Europe and beyond. If you've ever seen the show Vikings, think Athelstan's village, but on a global scale, just with a lot more church building and a lot less shirtless axe fighting. And we're not going to go down that rabbit hole too far because, frankly, yikes, there's a lot of complicated history attached to this. But one thing that historians generally agree on is this. As Christianity spread, it became important for early Christians to make their traditions accessible and appealing to local cultures. So instead of saying, stop celebrating your festivals, they did something a lot smarter. They layered Christian meaning over the top of festivals that people were already celebrating. You can think of it like rebranding ancient tradition. Which is why December 25th, which already had multiple major global celebrations tied to the sun's return, eventually became recognized as the birth of Jesus. And fun fact, most historians don't actually think he was born in December at all. But anyway, this rebranding process is something scholars talk about a lot because while it did help Christianity spread, it also meant that many older traditions were absorbed. They were reshaped or sometimes just faded out completely as cultures changed. And this is where Christmas as we know it starts taking shape. Not from one source, but from all of these older traditions sort of blending together under a new umbrella. But my next question, which I'm sure you're thinking as well, was how does Santa Claus as we know him come into all of this? Okay, I've just finished crocheting up his body and attaching his little arms, so now we're going to stuff as we talk. As I'm sure you figured out by now, modern day Santa didn't just materialize one afternoon and get crowned as the Christmas guy. No, he's basically like Frankenstein's monster of winter traditions. The version that we know today was stitched together over centuries, starting with the ancient figure of Old Man Winter, or as you now know him as, the god of war and death himself, Odin. Add in St. Nicholas, Krampus's more respectable co-worker, and boo. You've got early December gift giving with a side of mild existential terror. But over time, the dim ghost stuff and the please don't sacrifice me for a good harvest vibes got quietly retired. Christianity spread, cultures blended, and the old stories got reshaped into newer, friendlier ones. For a solid stretch, St. Nicholas took the center stage. He was portrayed as a Christian bishop, patron saint of children, professional sneaky gift giver, and generally tall, skinny, and mysterious. Think less small Santa and more mysterious wizard uncle who only shows up once a year. But Santa didn't become Santa until Clement Clarke Moore dropped the most influential PR Christmas campaign in history, A Visit from St. Nicholas, published in 1823. This one poem completely rebranded him. Suddenly he's jolly, round, magical, rides sleigh, and has 8 reindeer with recognizable names. You probably know it today as The Night Before Christmas, which tells you everything you need to know about how much this poem reshaped culture. And then we have Thomas Nast. Nast was a political cartoonist who published a drawing of Santa supporting Union troops during the American Civil War in 1862. Over the next 30 years, he kept refining Santa's look, the beard, the belly, the red suit, basically becoming Santa's art director, before Santa even had a marketing department, which is crazy. Meanwhile, the world was industrializing. Middle-class families suddenly had more disposable income and a growing obsession with making holidays special. Christmas crackers were invented in 1840, Christmas cards appeared in 1843, and mass-produced toys and decorations made the holiday feel bigger than ever. Then came the Victorians, who were obsessed with Queen Victoria and her 9 children. She pushed the idea of a cozy family Christmas and spending it home with her family. Now her husband, Prince Albert, guess where he came from? That's right, Germany. So guess what he popularized at the same time? You guessed it right, the Christmas tree. By the time we enter the 1900s, Christmas is fully recognizable. Sparkly, family-centric, heavy on gift-giving, but one myth still hangs around. Coca-Cola did not invent modern-day Santa. They did, however, help standardize him. Their ads in the 1920s still showed Santa as stern. But in 1931, Coca-Cola hired an illustrator, Haddon Sandblom, to redesign him. This version was warm, friendly, rosy-cheeked, and extremely ready to enjoy a mild Coke in the middle of winter. From 1931 to 1964, Coca-Cola pushed this image so consistently that it just became the Santa look, just in time for Christmas commercialization explosion of the 20th century. And from here, Christmas becomes big. Like, you need a second mortgage for holiday shopping. Big. Okay, I'm gonna pause here because I finished stuffing him, and let's make the head. Okay, so I just started crocheting the head and I'm trying to pick what eyes. I actually don't know. I like that this one gives more like goat demon, but this one's really cute. I wish you guys were here to help me pick because I don't know. I think I'm gonna go with this one. This one's bigger and that's the one that the pattern calls for, but I like that vibe. Oh, I don't know. I wish you could help me. All right, so fast forward to today, and Christmas is huge, right? Like astronomically huge. And let's be honest, capitalism is kind of the true king of Christmas now. If any of these festivals had a corporate sponsor, it would be December today. What's wild is how similar we are to our ancient ancestors. We're still drinking too much, still eating too much, still gathering with our families, and still giving gifts. We're still decorating our homes with lights and greenery and whatever shiny things we can get our hands on, which honestly is pretty Roman of us. Some people celebrate as a religious holiday, some as winter solstice, and some because it's one time of year where everyone finally stops working. But at its core, it's still a celebration of light, warmth, and surviving another year. And I just love that. It's kind of adorable that a collection of ancient festivals featuring demon goats, drunken chaos, sun gods, goddesses of rebirth, and chariot races, oh, and a literal god of war and death, slowly morphed into this. A holiday centered around family, love, rest, and maybe a little bit of unhinged holiday shopping. Us humans changed, traditions adapted, meaning shifted, but the heart of it is still kind of the same. And speaking of ancient traditions, I just finished crocheting my very own little Krampus, and look at him. He is horrifying, adorable, and absolutely ready to steal your snacks. If you enjoyed this video, please hit the like and subscribe button down below. It honestly means the world to me. And if you made your very own Krampus plushie, I would love to see it. Please tag me on my socials. I can't wait to see what you've made. Thanks for being here, and until next time, happy crafting and stay curious.